Wars do not start with a gunshot. They start when the global bank account hits zero, and the world realizes the money isn't coming back. If you do not recognize the patterns of the next 24 months, you are essentially walking into a bank run with no exit plan. The simple math of 2026 is that the world now owes more in interest than it can actually produce in a year. While the general public is still looking for the fire alarm, the exit doors on traditional markets have already begun to lock for anyone holding paper wealth. We are currently standing right in front of the maturity wall. Understanding this specific timeline is the only way to see why your personal bank account is suddenly a target for government survival policy. In 2021, corporations and governments took out trillions in 5-year loans at nearly 0% interest, and the deadline to pay those back is 2026. This isn't a theory, it is a fixed calendar of payments that cannot be met without a total system meltdown or a massive devaluation of your savings. Most companies took out those low-interest loans on 5-year fixed deals, meaning thousands of businesses are now being forced to either pay that money back in full or sign new deals with interest rates that have tripled. Spotting which specific sectors cannot handle this interest shock today allows you to insulate your own family's wealth before the rest of the market catches on. Most mid-sized companies are already running out of cash just to keep the lights on, a reality currently hidden by accounting tricks that fail the second the bills come due in 2026. These zombie companies are about to see their interest costs skyrocket overnight as those old 2021 contracts expire. Watching how these firms fail over the next few months will provide the exact roadmap for the banking freeze that history warns us about before every major conflict. This isn't a small market dip, it is a physical liquidation of the middle class that turns your bank's balance sheet into a liability. To see 2026 clearly, you have to look at the ghost of 1918. Back then, the British Empire used its control over the world's money to starve Germany out of the market by freezing their credit and blocking their trade. This specific historical pattern is the only map that actually predicts where the next global conflict will break out. That financial blockade forced Germany to realize that if they wanted their industry to survive, they had to fight for the resources they could no longer buy with a frozen currency. The game hasn't changed. We're just seeing new players on the same old board using the same broken rules. When you kick a powerful country out of the money system, you leave them with only one choice: to take what they need by force. Paying attention to the shift in how oil is traded right now is the most reliable way to spot a currency collapse months before it hits the evening news. The way the world is currently abandoning the dollar for energy trades is a signal that the trust hold the global economy together has already evaporated. When trust dies, the only thing left to settle the debt is the logic of the sword. The math is cold, and it is terminal. We have entered the interest trap, where the government is forced to borrow new money just to pay the interest on the money they already spent yesterday. Your personal tax dollars are effectively being used as a shield to keep this debt bubble from popping for just one more day. The crossover point, where debt interest exceeds tax revenue, is the specific moment when a currency begins its final, vertical decline towards zero. When a country owes more than it can ever pay back, history shows it eventually has to choose between a revolution at home or a war abroad. Understanding this empire cycle explains why the push for digital currencies and emergency powers is actually a sign of total desperation from the ruling class. We are now at the point where the US is spending more on interest than it does on its entire military. Death rattle for every major empire for the last 500 years. They are preparing for a world where they have to print money just to survive, which makes every dollar in your pocket worth less with every passing hour. The US dollar has been turned into a weapon, and the rest of the world is finally hitting back with their own financial shields. By freezing the bank accounts of other nations, the system proved to everyone that your money is only yours as long as you remain politically compliant. There is now a shadow bank system called CIPS that makes our current sanctions completely useless. This massive global network was built specifically by China and Russia to bypass the Western system and protect their own national survival. Nations are now using this system to buy and sell everything from oil to microchips without ever touching a Western bank account. Seeing the shift in these global trade flows explains why the cost of living at your local store is never going back down to where it was. When you understand how this new trade system works, you realize why a conflict in the Pacific is no longer a matter of if, but when. Don't believe the story that these other countries are acting because they are strong. They are acting because they are completely desperate. China is currently trapped in a cycle where their economy is dying, and they are physically running out of young people to keep the industrial wheels turning. A cornered animal is always more dangerous than a hungry one, and their time to act is running out. Their housing market, which used to be the safest place for people to save money, has turned into a graveyard of empty buildings and unpaid loans that can never be recovered. In China, one young person now has to support two parents and four grandparents, weight that their economy simply cannot carry for much longer. This demographic biological clock is the most accurate predictor of when they will be forced to strike Taiwan to secure their future. A conflict over Taiwan isn't just about territory, it's the only way for the government to justify total state control and distract the public from the disaster at home. This is the pressure that turns a local crisis into a global conflict that will rewrite the rules of wealth for everyone. Everything you think is wealth is actually just a promise from someone else to pay you back at a later date. In a war, those promises are the first things to be broken by emergency government rules and force majeure clauses. Moving from paper promises into assets you actually control is the only way to exit the blast zone before the 2026 maturity wall hits. That wall marks the end of the dream that things will always stay the same, and the people holding paper wealth will be the ones who pay the bill for the reset. Historically, the people who survived these times were the ones who held things they could actually touch, like gold, land, and real-world skills. These are counterparty-free assets, meaning their value doesn't depend on a functioning stock exchange or a solvent government. You don't have to be a victim of this cycle, but you do have to stop pretending the old rules from 20 years ago still work in 2026. If you see the patterns now, you can be the one who stays safe while everyone else is in a panic. The doors are still open, but the hallway is getting very, very narrow.